One of the 7 wonders of the natural world, the Grand Canyon has been inspiring people ever since they first laid eyes upon it. Featuring awe-inspiring beauty and a size that humbles most, the Grand Canyon is one of the most popular natural attractions in the U.S., with over 5 million visitors per year. Today we'll talk about how the Grand Canyon came to exist. We'll use the current beliefs among geologists. Science is not static, it is constantly evolving. There was a time when it was universally accepted that the Earth was flat and that the Sun rotated around the Earth. What we go over today may not be the standard in 10 years. It may also be the standard a century from now. We have no way of knowing what the future holds. Before we start, a few facts about the Grand Canyon. The Grand Canyon is 277 river miles long. At its widest point, it is 18 miles across and has an average depth of 1 mile. The water from every river in the world would fill the Grand Canyon not even halfway. The Colorado River, which has formed the Grand Canyon, can have up to 1,800 million gallons of water flowing down it per hour. That is more water per second than the average U.S. household uses per year. So how did this natural wonder form? Current geologic theory places it at only 6 million years of age. Very young in geologic time. The oldest known rock in the Grand Canyon is found along the Colorado River and is called Vishnu Schist. The schist is 1.7 billion years old. The presence of garnets in the schist leads geologists to theorize that this area was once under immense pressure. Garnet can only be produced through incredible pressure. The theory is that 2 billion years ago, this area was under mountains the size of the current Himalayas. 500 million years of erosion and constant freezing and thawing eroded the mountains down and left a flat, featureless plain. Beginning around 500 million years ago, the area that would become the Grand Canyon was submerged under a shallow inland sea. Geologists estimate that there have been at least 8 different inland seas here, the most recent being around 80 million years ago. The seas left behind different sediments that would eventually form the rock that we see today. Sand became sandstone, mud became shale, and the calcified remains of marine organisms became limestone. The distinctive red hue of the Grand Canyon comes from the presence of iron, which is found throughout the different geologic layers of rock. The iron rust over millions and millions of years, resulting in this red color. The Grand Canyon started its transformation from a flat, featureless plain to what we see today between 80 and 40 million years ago during the Laramide orogeny. During this time period, the Grand Canyon was lifted straight up, causing the last inland sea to drain to the northeast. This happened when the Farallon Plate subducted underneath the western coast of the United States at a relatively fast speed and an extremely shallow angle. This resulted in the Grand Canyon area being lifted straight up and the creation of mountains much further inland than normally occurs. The results of this can be found from Canada to Mexico and as far east as the Black Hills of South Dakota. Now that we have the elevated flat plain, we need a carving mechanism. Using dating methods at nearby Muddy Canyon, geologists believe that the Colorado River started carving the Grand Canyon around 5.5 to 6 million years ago. The current theory is referred to as the Spillover Theory. The Colorado River flowed into and eventually filled a basin located about 100 miles east of the Grand Canyon. The lake that was formed was over 20,000 square miles and contained 3,000 cubic miles of water, larger than Lake Michigan. The lake is called Lake Bittahoche. Colorado River kept flowing, and eventually the basin's capacity was exceeded and the water started to spill over. The water spilled over slowly at first, ultimately gaining speed as it flowed downhill towards the ocean and forming the Grand Canyon. Sand and gravel deposited near the beginning of the Grand Canyon in what is now Lee's Ferry, Arizona, were measured using a specialized instrument that detects how light has affected atoms within the different layers of the rock. Using that data, the geologists have determined that the rate of the canyon cutting is 1,000 feet per million years, 1 foot per 1,000 years, and 1 inch per century. The formation of the Grand Canyon was aided greatly by the rock and debris carried by the Colorado River. The river drops an average of 10 feet for every mile that it flows and carries an estimated 500 million tons of rock and debris each day. The final theory has to do with the varying width of the Grand Canyon, 18 miles at some points, 1 mile in others. The current theory has to do with hard limestone and sandstone resting upon a layer of soft shale. When it rains, the shale weakens and eventually will break apart, falling into the river and causing some of the limestone and sandstone to eventually do the same. Because this is not uniform, this gives us the varying widths of the canyon. In conclusion, while it can be argued that the process for building the Grand Canyon started 2 billion years ago with Himalaya-sized mountains creating rock through immense pressure, the actual carving of the canyon, powered by the Colorado River and the overflow of Lake Bittahoche, started a mere 5.5 to 6 million years ago.